Welcome, Ruben. Good to see everyone. My name is Dr. Saleh. I'm a double Ivy graduate. I graduated from Yale and Cornell. I'm a current physician. I've been doing admissions consulting for a lot of students for some of the top schools in the country, including Ivies and Ivy Plus schools. And on this channel, the Double Ivy Grad, I want to share a little bit about what it takes to get to some of the top schools in the country. And I'm really excited today because I'm starting a new series talking about how to get to specific top schools by interviewing people who are actually there, those that you want to get into the positions. And I'm really even more excited because I'm starting it off strong with my friend here, Ruben, who's a current sophomore at MIT, double major, computer science and mechanical engineering. So we're gonna pick his brain a little bit for the next hour about everything that it took to get him there, hopefully to give all of you some insight into how to follow in his footsteps, so should you choose. And I want to just get a brief intro from Ruben about who you are and let the world know about you a little bit before we jump in.
Yeah, so hey everybody, my name is Ruben Steven. I'm currently 20 years old and I'm at MIT studying mechanical engineering and computer science. Currently in independent activity period, which is our little like break between fall and spring semester, working on undergraduate research and overall, yeah, I'm just trying to manage everything.
You're doing the best that I've seen. So, Ruben, we want to get like the basics out of the way that people really want to know. And unfortunately, people get hung over this. What were your
Yeah.
stats to get you into MIT?
Yeah, so I guess like brief overview, GPA was a 3.9 unweighted, 5.3 weighted. SAT score was a 1520. That's a 770 on math, 750 on reading and writing. Didn't take the ACT. I did take 11 AP classes. I'll try to see if I can remember them off the top of my head. I know it was AP Stats, AP Calc, AP uh, Gov, AP Physics 1, AP Physics 2, AP Physics C E&M, AP Physics C Mechanics.
Mhm.
Um, I'm forgetting like one or two more. Oh, AP Environmental, and then AP English Slang and AP Literature. That's
Wow.
still one, but it's fine.
That's a feat in itself that you remember all of that. That's awesome. Would you say that your high school kind of provided a good amount of like resources and APs? Sounds like you took a bunch of APs. Just trying to get a sense for what kind of high school you went to.
Yeah, definitely. I went to a magnet school called Suncoast Community High School in Revere Beach, Florida.
Mhm.
And essentially, like, yeah, they made a very big point about having access to those like higher level like AP and IB classes. And that was like one of it. Like, it was like the school in like my county for like if you're trying to go to like higher education, that's probably where you'd want to be.
That's awesome. Well, you're proof that it works. So, what do you think are some of the activities that stood out in your application that kind of really helped you get in?
Mm. So I guess like overall, like before I get into any other specific parts of my
Sure.
application, it was slightly atypical in the sense that it wasn't like science Olympiads and like published research. I think I like you to ask the question of like, oh, overall, what had got me in it? And I think like the theme that I tried to tell students whenever they ask me is I applied as it was the story I told. And the
Yeah.
story I told mostly had to do with overcoming adversity. And a
Mhm.
part of that and like the like extracurriculars I did, one of the main ones I would say, like and specifically because of the way I wrote about it, was my part-time jobs.
Mhm.
And because on one hand, you could just say, oh, yeah, I worked at Chick-fil-A and then I worked as a waiter. But I remember specifically on the MIT application, there was a part where they had mentioned, like, what is your proudest achievement?
Yeah.
And the answer I gave back was purchasing my car, which I did as like in like due to having worked those jobs. And I remember specifically I told a story about New Year's Eve going into 2022 when I had slept on the floor of the bathroom of my waiter job because
Wow.
I didn't have enough money for an Uber
Mhm.
and I needed to be back the next morning. And so I think, and it's like there's a like on one hand that shows like I'm listing an extracurricular of like, oh, I worked a part-time job in addition to my schoolwork. The answer behind the answer is that it shows a level of, I guess, one, being willing to delay gratification and like work to get something that you want, and then two, resilience and ability to overcome adversity because I slept on the floor. But
100%. 100%. Nah. Thank you for sharing that. So that's actually like is a beautiful segue into my next question, which is partly the application itself for MIT, but also for a lot of people who are sort of like really worried about oh my God, I am not like a finalist in this competition. I didn't like start, $1 million company, this and that, because they have some notion that that's what it takes to get an MIT. But from your story, it's like, no, you don't have to have these like typical standout activities, but what you do can be standout within the context of your personal life. And a lot of people kind of see that as a setback from explaining it or showing it in your application. So what would you, for somebody who has like a similar story as yours, they do well on everything, they just don't maybe have anything like super, super stand out, typically speaking, but they do have that personal touch. How would you say that they could incorporate that into the application? Is there anything, any tips that you have for the MIT essays in particular that you would recommend for somebody to kind of keep in mind?
Hmm. This one's a bit tricky. Like I wouldn't say I have it completely like figured out, but I
Sure.
could say like what I think worked for me and what was going through my head was to be completely honest and then simply like I was really just going about it like framing my honesty in a way that it's answering those like meta questions of
Mm,
like, no, I have these stories in my life, I have these experiences already. It's just like I guess like the way that I had filtered it is like, okay, what's a time that things got particularly rough? Because like especially like I don't know if like you have a similar experience, but when you speak to some of these more higher achieving high school kids, it's like they'll tell you their resume and like a part of it is because they're trying to seem very competent and effective. But then like a lot of the questions I end up asking is like, okay, I know it had to be hard at some point in there. Like I know you had there
yeah,
wasn't all smooth
exactly.
sailing. And so
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
find that point because it's probably on the path to doing something cool. Like it was I was trying to like code this coding project and yeah, it was like really hard for like that week and I didn't understand how to do it. And it's like, okay, boom, that's where your story lies.
Yeah.
And I might be going a bit off topic, but I think like in
Oh,
terms of like that storytelling aspect, like the core question like that you in order to have somebody engaged is they want to know, will the hero be able to accomplish whatever task it is? And so for that to be the case, you have to be able to set up like one, that the task is worth accomplishing, two, the stakes. So you have to be able to communicate, hey, I want this thing. This is why it's important to me. And then three, the obstacle. But
mm,
this thing is in my path. So for me, it's like, I want this car. It's really important to me because I'm playing basketball and like I'm going to this XYZ, et cetera, et cetera. And like I'm not, and then the obstacle is like I'm
mm,
not able to because I currently don't have transportation.
mm.
And in addition to that, I don't have transportation because I don't have the funds for it. And so that's the obstacle. So it's like, oh, what is this kid going to do about it? And
Yeah,
then in from the way that you like frame your solution is like that's where the meta communication about the trait or skill it is that you're wanting to show to them. So like how did I end up doing it? By like honestly like putting my head down and grinding it out and dealing with the work, which is showing like, okay, ability for adversity. And specifically because you had mentioned like thinking you have to like cure cancer to get into MIT.
yeah,
Really like I would say like you do have to show a level of academic competency, ideally in the like field that you're trying to apply to,
of course.
but that can be done in many different ways.
Hmm. Yeah, 100%. I love that. First of all, when you were describing that three-step process, it sounded like you were born to be an engineer. That just really sounded like how you would probably approach a lot of your challenges. Now, going off of that for a second, did you have
Mm.
a different approach for MIT's application versus other top schools, or did you kind of have that same mindset for everything, just out of curiosity?
That's another thing, I guess, like towards like the atypicality of how I applied. I only applied to MIT in terms of top schools. And
Mm,
the only other school I applied to was the University of Central Florida
okay.
because of that it was rolling deadline. It was in my state. I had bright futures, so I knew I was going to get in with a full ride. And so
Mm,
I'm like, I had my approach with and yeah, I think and it came through in my essay to MIT because my
yeah.
approach overall or attitude was I know that I'm going to be okay, one, and I approached it like in my essays, I said something along the lines, it would be very helpful to have the admission of this institution, but there's still a plan that I'm going to enact and like college, regardless of where I end up, is a stepping stone and like aid to that, but the plan has to be bigger than just the school.
Oh, I love that. Is that something you communicated to MIT? You feel like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
There's a
they're
line
like,
in
with you or without you, I'm gonna be a success. That's kind of the attitude you felt like you went in with it.
definitely.
Yeah.
And I think because we had talked about something similar in the last time we met about how you're trying to show you're trying to make yourself a good bet for the admissions officer to bring to their council. And
Hmm.
essentially what that looks like is you want to show that or communicate to them that this is a kid that one is going to like be a good return on investment for our rating. Like he's going to end up doing cool things regardless of if we let him here. And
Yeah.
then also like, they're going to be like interesting talk with professors, or like they're going to be able to communicate interestingly with professors.
Yeah.
And I think that's like I did it through the oh he a little bit of like oh he doesn't care, but it's like my stats and like like the fact that I was trying academically wasn't like oh I'm just blowing this off completely, but it's more so like there's a drive that's like yeah this is a good bet because he's gonna get to the destination regardless.
Yeah. So it almost seemed as if, hey, MIT, I'm providing you the opportunity to accept me versus the other way around. I already have my path charted, and I'm allowing you to be part of my story. And I feel like in a more eloquent way, you kind of communicated that in your application, and looks like it worked. So I'm getting from a lot of these different responses right now is like this sense of maturity that you have, whether it's kind of your approach to applying. I mean, first of all, we're going to leave on the side for now that you only applied to MIT as one of the top schools, which is interesting in itself. But kind of the way you're communicating that nonchalantness, for lack of better phrasing, for your application, that you kind of kept that level-headedness when speaking even with other students, probably around that time when you're applying, everybody's like, trying to flaunt their grades and their extracurriculars. How did you maintain that level-headedness kind of going into it? Because a lot of people are, they get affected by others and what they say around them, kind of like when everybody is just throwing out their highlight reels and you're seeing kind of everything else. How do you maintain that?
It's funny you mentioned that because for however bad it may have been in high school, it's just gotten like the same problem, but a bit more because like now the selection process to get into MIT means that everyone like I'm in school with people who like, oh yeah, I was solving
Oh,
cancer.
okay. So
And
that's what the vibe is right now. Okay.
but then in terms of like keeping a level head, especially in regards to the application process, I think it was that I had my sights on a bigger goal. And
Mhm.
so it wasn't like as though I was catastrophizing like oh this is the big like this is it it was never a feeling of this is it or this is particularly grave or serious it like not trying to like gloss over everything it obviously was a serious like I was anxious when I got the admissions letter because like as everyone
Yeah,
would
yeah, yeah,
be
of course.
but there was always that underlying sense of like I'm not aiming at this I'm aiming beyond this and like okay I might not end up like yeah, if you're setting the trajectory to your path, like okay, this little middle part right here, this could be at UCF or this could be at MIT, but regardless, I'm going
You're
here.
going there.
So I don't know. I feel like everybody else might have been like, oh, I need to get to this specific school. Like I need to get to this specific school, and like that was just never my I guess mentality or approach to it.
Is that something that you just kind of developed that kind of mindset on your own, or did you feel like there was an influence, maybe like a mentor, somebody in your family, or somebody that you listened to that kind of instilled that kind of thinking in you? Because I think honestly, out of a lot of things we're going to talk about today, this is like the hardest part and a big key to most people. Yes, we talk about like how to get into these top schools, but really they're all stepping stones to where you really should be, and that's what I'm hoping people can learn from you today.
I think it was a mix of factors. So like it wasn't in terms of like because yeah I like the word mentor is really funny because like it wasn't necessarily somebody in my like direct circle but it was like I'm thinking specifically of my family it wasn't like I had like my big brothers telling me oh look into higher education or look into
Uh,
STEM even my mom it was more so I think the lack of that in tandem with my access to the internet
mm-hmm.
and then specifically in terms of like the thinking bigger and why school in itself wasn't always the objective, I would credit that with the 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss.
Mm,
So sophomore year of high school during oh that's my bad. Sophomore year of high school during COVID, so I'm in that environment where I don't necessarily have the most like role models. And
yeah.
so I'm doing a bit worse in school because I'm like there's more distractions around and there's less like a quiet environments where I'm like somewhat obligated to be on task.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to really like I guess do a lot of self-reflecting and like I had set the intention to self-improve. And then on that path I had found the book 4 Hour Work Week. And essentially like the core premise of the book to me is like it opened my eyes to the idea that I didn't necessarily just Like if I, because my objective, like higher or high, like the highest order objective that I was talking about aiming at is like I need to fix the socioeconomic status of my family. There's
Yeah.
multiple different paths to that same objective, and I had that book had introduced me to the fact that maybe I didn't have to go through the salaried route. I could do it as a like a solo working entrepreneur. And then
Hmm.
I can own my time, and I'm like, oh, that seems like the objective, like that seems like a higher order objective that the engineer salary would be serving. Like what
Yeah.
is the money for? The money's to buy me a lifestyle or to be able to support the people I care about. And then like that's the lifestyle I'd want to live.
That's amazing. Wow. Kind of again speaking to that maturity you have. Awesome. So we can talk about this for many, many hours. One
Mhm.
other thing I want to ask about, like, the nitty-gritty of the application process. Did you have an interview with MIT?
Yes,
Yeah. Can you
I
tell us a
did.
little bit about that? Like, how'd you prepare for it? Any tips you give out to somebody who's having one coming up?
Yeah. So my primary form of preparation was I remember well obviously like I remember scouring like Reddit, like okay, what are they going to ask me?
Of course.
Um and then in terms of like how I got better at the skill as soon as possible, I would say like role playing, like asking somebody like because there's me, I had a friend who was also interviewing, so I'm like, okay, we'll just take turns. Like I'll read out the questions, just getting comfortable with being grilled or like interrogated to a degree, because like there's going to be a level of anxiety regardless, and then
Yeah.
it's just like taking enough reps such that you can ignore it more or less.
Yeah. Was there anything that caught you off guard during the interview? Like, all that preparation is great if you're getting asked the questions that you prepared for, but is there anything that caught you off guard? And if so, how did you feel like you dealt with it?
Hmm. I don't remember like too much of the specifics of the questions, but I remember being particularly surprised by like I don't think we got to all of the ones that were on the list.
Mm,
And it ended up like I was surprised by the fact that it felt more like just a conversation, like you were just flowing with the person as opposed to like it didn't feel like, okay, now answer this other essay question, now answer this one.
yeah, exactly. That's probably like with most interviews, honestly, whether you're applying for a job or, applying for college. If the more conversation like, the better, because they're like, this is the kind of person that we can have that conversation with instead of being like, oh, you okay, next question, next question. So that's actually a great indicator for, let's say, if somebody's interviewing and they want to, everybody wants to be like, did this go well or not? Then that's probably a good indicator of that. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else want to add on to that?
I was gonna say like just like I think you had mentioned it a bit, but like it goes back to that original point of thinking from the perspective of an admissions officer and like
Hmm.
why are they making you do that interview? So
Yeah,
that like asking an alumni, someone who's been there, like, hey, give us you've done this process, MIT alumni. Vet this kid, like they're asking pretty much they're asking them to give you a vibe check. Like did this kid pass the vibe check, yes or no? And then
exactly.
like the answer, therefore, like if you want to win the interview, you don't even win, but it's just like show up as your authentic self and get the like basically like you're really just trying to get your own anxiety out of the way of letting your personality show. Because then they'll have something to say like, oh, like, yeah, this kid's really cool. Like I really see them, I see how they would fit here, is what you'd want them to say.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I just imagine like the moment you start walking away and they thank you, the person just pulls out their phone and they just text like pass the
Yeah.
vibe check. Okay, so we kind of know a little bit about, your background, your atypical background a little bit compared to maybe most of your peers applying, going all in sort of on MIT as the only top school, but still not, it's not the end of the world if you didn't get in, you still have that your sights on the future. So let's talk a little bit about you now as a current student. I know there's no such thing as a typical day, your days are like different, but if you were to give us like a brief breakdown of what a day looks like as a student at MIT, what would you say?
So yeah, I guess I don't want to speak for everybody, but I can say like
Or
what my
your
typical day looks
experience.
like. Yeah. So like I'll be up at 6 a.m., 6 to 7:30. I'm working out 7:30 to about 8-ish, like shower, hygiene, stuff like that. And then I'll head over to our student center, which is like in the middle of the campus. And then I'd go grab a coffee, and then there's a like a quiet like I have like my specific spot that I like. It's like in the basement of the student center, where it's like
Okay.
honestly it's like quieted out so that I can engage in deep work, which is for me
Oh,
like So like I'll have my coffee in hand. Like sometimes it'll vary, but like by 9, I'm probably sitting down at that desk with my
Yeah.
laptop out, etc. And so I made sure not to put any of my classes until 11 a.m. So I would give myself like the 2 hours to, okay, do I need to respond to any emails? Do I have any like notes or like pre-notes I want to be taking, et cetera, like getting myself prepared for my day. And
Mhm.
then classes, exact block depends semester per semester, but usually I'm done by 5 every day. And then after that, I would go back, either grab food like immediately after, and then go back to my dorm and work after that, or I would go back, work for a little while, and then when I'm having like one of my best days, it's I'll go eat with friends so that I'm like, because something like about the MIT experience is that it often gets like it's very easy to end up feeling isolated and like you're
Yeah.
just doing work all day. And so especially like this semester, I've been trying to be more intentional about like bringing in like company and community as much as possible. But then
Love
after
that
that,
personally.
mm,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna like finish, yeah, finish out
Yeah.
the day. So like after food, after food, probably done by like 8:30, back to the dorm, work until depending on like the week or like if there's a midterm, I'll say like midnight-ish. Sometimes that'll be like 3 a.m. But it'll vary. But
That
like
really went from midnight to 3 a.m. real quick. Okay.
yeah.
Uh, wow. Okay. So, I mean, honestly, it doesn't sound like anything crazy from other students, but what I do want to go back to the other thing, right? So the interviewer was trying to see if you passed the vibe check. Let's keep it real. People have this perception of MIT and some of these top schools as maybe, depending on where you're coming from, that you won't find your people. Have you found people that passed your vibe check?
Yeah, definitely. Like yeah, I guess we could cut this if I go like too far, but like keeping it a whole being like as a black dude at a predominantly white and Asian
Yeah.
university, like I got there and I'm like, I'm not really feeling this if I'm being quite honest. And like, yeah, calling a whole spade a spade, I've had situations where it felt like I get like a double look or like a double take because of the fact that like I look like that. Like for context, I'm 6'3". Right now my hair's out, but like I'll have it in two strand twists, which like resembles dreads. When it's warm out, like I'll wear like a tank top or something like that. And like I have a shoulder tattoo. And so
Mm.
like on one hand, I like being completely honest, like on one hand, I see how the thin slice of like, oh, thug. And it's like basically like if I'm being quite honest, I did chafe a little bit at that because I'm like, bro, I'm here. Like I literally go to the same school as
You're
you.
like, you
Like
see this ID? Yeah.
but yeah, and but that's like those are I would say isolated incidents. It's definitely not characteristic of like the typical vibe at MIT, but it doesn't exist. And so I have been particularly intentional about finding spaces and like community with people that share my ethnic background to a degree. Like I try not to like make it like a single bubble, and like I'm trying to like ensure that I still get a wide variety of like perspectives and people, but there definitely are people of like similar backgrounds to me of like that more like low income and or like I guess urban background.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I hear you on that. I mean, I come personally, I'm from like immigrant parents,
Mhm.
Arab immigrant parents, very low income. My educational system, if it wasn't for my high school, I wouldn't have any of the trajectory that I have now. And like kind of when I went to undergrad at Cornell, a lot of the my peers were just like, what is normal for them is like, miles away from what is normal for me. Like just like the basics of like where they're going to be vacationing, what access to resources they have, things like that. And I'm out here just trying to like struggle to make ends meet. So anyway, I think it's important, at least like thankfully for me at Cornell, there's such a large student body that I was able to find my people. So kind of going off
Mm.
of that, so far in what your year and a half-ish of being at MIT, have there been any particular like resources, be it clubs, interest groups, anything else at all at MIT specifically that has had an impact on you that you think was helpful?
Yeah, definitely. I would say like I've like reduced involvement in it now due to like my increasing workload, but in
Yeah.
terms of like career preparedness, the MIT Motorsports FSAE team, immaculate. Like I feel like it's the closest experience that I've gotten to like, oh, this is what it would be like as a working engineer in my time
Mhm.
here. So like I worked on it primarily during my like freshman year, and then it tapered off during like spring, which also brings me to this isn't a student group, but it's like a resource slash service that MIT provides, which is
Mm.
MIT S cubed, which is student support services.
Okay.
And so I had somewhat of a rough patch in my spring semester of freshman year, and they helped me get through a lot of that. And
Okay.
it, but going back to clubs, I'm also a part of the MIT Student Events Board. And
Hmm.
so it's taught me a lot of like organizational and like management skills because you're working in that some sort of group setting. You get ownership of this part of like, for example, we plan something called Springfest every year, which is where we get
Hmm.
an outside artist to come in, essentially like a festival for MIT, all of the MIT student body. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of like logistical overhead that goes with that. And it's just been really interesting to like be hands-on and like, oh, this is what it's like to actually like because one of my main objectives, like when I like after I graduate, something I'm particularly interested in is social impact. And so I feel like that's another way that I'm building up that skill that I'm going to need later.
Perfect. I wanna like go off of that, kind of like your trajectory and kind of your setting your goals, far and above MIT. But before that, how are you balancing all of that? What would you recommend to somebody who's starting out, kind of like, all right, congrats, the euphoria of getting into MIT is probably winding down a little bit. You're there now and like time to grind it out. What do you do to kind of make the best out of it?
So I guess like that thing I mentioned before of like finding community and like people to I guess it's not necessarily that you're like shifting your weight onto them, but like distribute out the weight of like the course load.
Hmm.
At least emotionally speaking. So also I would say so like one, finding community, two, keeping close connection to your hobbies or things that you do for the pure joy of it. Because I
Yeah.
feel like there's times often during the semester where I'll get in this rat race of like, oh, I haven't done anything that wasn't directly work related or
Mm.
like in support of something work related in a week. And then like for me, that'll be like I write like a journal, I make music sometimes, spending time with friends a lot helps. And yeah, that's more of like the emotional side, like, okay, how do
Yeah,
you
of
stay
course.
like sane? But then I guess like in terms of like the more logistical, like time management aspect, trying like not perfect, but trying to be ahead of the ball as opposed to like trying to play catch up is a gigantic difference.
Uh-huh.
Specifically to time management, I would say the deep work sessions. I
Mm.
think this is, I guess, like the way I operate, like having that specified, like I know from 9 to 11, nobody bothered me. I'm in here, my phone's on D&D, or like
Mm.
I need to get back. Like I have this specific set block of like 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. where I know I'm going to get something else done.
Yeah.
Because like if you, so, it might work for some other people, but that more sporadic, like I'll get 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there. It doesn't allow me personally to build up enough momentum to deal with like the type of problems that will be on an MIT set.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's totally true. And I actually really like that you talk about the emotional aspect of it because most people kind of gloss over it and it really makes a big difference. Are you the kind of person that uses like it's just like some more tactical like stuff,
Mm.
like reminders on your phone? Do you use a calendar, things like that to kind of like plan out your week or anything like that?
Yeah, live by the GCal.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the yeah. So Google Calendar has like a lot of like my outside events or like big blocks where I'm like, okay, I know to like it has all my classes loaded into it from like the beginning of the semester.
Hmm.
In addition to that, I also use my notes app a lot. It goes in tandem with the journaling and like it's a part of my morning routine where I'll start it off by thought vomiting and like getting a morning page out just to like get a sense of like, okay, where am I at today? Like how am I feeling? And like at the end, I'll put it into a day plan. Like so it'll most likely have the same stuff that's on my like Google Calendar, but like the iCloud notes can I make them into checklists.
Mm.
So partially for like that motivational thing of like, okay, I did one thing that was particularly difficult. Okay, I'm gonna go like have the tactile because like there is like there's tactile feedback of like, okay, click, and it's like you
Yeah,
feel like
yeah,
more motivation. And like that helps a lot for me because like okay, I
yeah.
make like I because like you can get caught up in like, dang, I just worked for however many hours. Like, what did I just do? It's like I got this, and this done.
Yeah. Love that. And then another thing, because there's a lot of like current engineers that are watching this too, like not just trying to get in. And the
Mhm.
biggest thing is how do they succeed? So there are many things I'm sure that goes into it, but at least from like let's say a note-taking perspective, like studying for some of those classes, what one tip do you have kind of like to make the best and be the most efficient at your studying? Because I know there's a lot of people who like end up showing up, recording the audio, transcribing it, and trying to take notes later. There's like a lot of different things. I'd love to kind of hear your perspective where you kind of just go in, absorb, and then walk out and you're good to go.
Yeah, no, okay, so yeah, like general like learning methods, I would say lectures haven't been like they're not my preferred style.
Mhm.
So in terms of notes, I haven't personally been using them, but I think the like Aussie.ai is one option. I think those
Yeah,
Otter.ai, but like
yeah, yeah.
the transcriptions would probably be particularly useful. But in general, I think like my general approach to learning is to try as hard as possible to identify where my gaps in knowledge are, like off at the top. So like
Mm,
you can't start until you know what you don't know. And so
exactly.
the Feynman technique I find to be very useful in like doing one pagers of like, okay, explain this from scratch. And then wherever you hit your gap, or like wherever you start like waffling, it's like you don't know what you're talking about. And then
Exactly.
uh, yeah, I'm gonna just be completely honest. Like there is some like I guess environmental like thoughts about it, but ChatGPT has been my best friend in terms of like using it as a
Yeah,
tutor
yeah, yeah.
because of the fact that like and particularly like you can use those AI tools incorrectly, and I feel like there's a correct way to use them, and the
Mhm.
correct way for me has been to use them as a learning tool instead of like an answer generator. And so I might literally I'll have like a written out, okay, what explain instantaneous center of rotation because that's like from a class I took this past semester. And so I'll start off with like my like rough sketch definition, and then I'll be like da, 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 da. I'll literally like put dot dot dot. I stopped understanding here. What else am
Yeah.
I missing from this definition? And then go from there.
Oh, I really love that because I mean again, ChatGPT or any other AI tool is a tool at the end of the day, and the trick is how to use it. And like, yes, you can, throw in whatever questions you have and you just spit out the answer, but you're at the stage now that you need to learn. You're gonna be in the job market very soon, and it can only get you so far. So I really appreciate that, kind of bringing that approach to light. So now, so far in your year and a half, how do you feel being at MIT has changed, if at all, your career decisions, prospects, kind of where you want to be? We already had that image before applying. Has it changed at all since college?
Yeah, definitely. In large part due to the like inclusion or like insertion of the fact that I create digital content now.
Yeah,
So I guess like it's worth like defining the before and then what it's shifted to after.
sure.
Before it was mostly like a like yeah, mostly for myself, like entrepreneur, like digital products such because they have like infinite scale essentially, and then assuming a mixture of I guess like using the idea was to use the technical expertise and still is use the technical expertise to apply it towards creating some sort of project and then having the branding of specifically it was like AI robotics was
Mm,
slash still is AI robotics because of the fact that MIT CEO and founder of an AI robotics company seems like it would be able to like go pretty far. However, it's shifted now a bit more towards that societal impact aspect because of the fact that I started creating content
mhm,
and like through doing it, I had like when I first did it, it was somewhat as the top end of my funnel to my tutoring business.
mhm.
But having it started to interact with other people or like interact with some of the students as well as the people who are now coming to me for like college missions, essentially like coaching or consulting, I developed more and more of a, I guess, felt connection to wanting to help out underrepresented youth and like people who come from a similar background to me who may not have had those sort of opportunities and like not have had the, I guess, information or like just like the frame of thought to be thinking higher education. And I see a path for myself in which I get heavily involved in trying to like make those resources more accessible and available for those people.
Yeah.
And then my bad. But the
You're
thing
good.
like
You're good. I'm seeing the light bulb go off there. What you got?
yeah, but then to like the nature of college is that it's going to continue evolving and like on the way to figure out like which specific like area of specialization I'd like to enter into.
Mhm.
And the newest wrinkle in like my considerations honestly has been happening over this month of January with this research project I'm involved in
Okay.
because it's essentially I'm participating in a student assembly on climate and sustainability.
Hmm.
And the education that I've been getting as a result of speaking to some of these experts on the field and like people who have shown me pathways in which like the engineering work can directly tie into this like large scale problem that I also like speaking of social impact, I think that's one of the like teaching these kids how to get into school wouldn't really matter if there's no planet for them to go to school on. And so that's somewhere else I've found my attention being drawn recently. And I really think that like with the media aspect, I believe what I'm currently building has the potential to serve both purposes,
Hmm.
assuming I put in enough work.
Well, I hope it works out because unless MIT like replicates itself on Mars, where this is the only one we have. Uh, and I love the fact that you kind of brought it back to how you started to kind of hone maybe a little bit some of your consulting and some of your help to people of a similar background. I mean, I've also part of the reason I started a lot of this is because I was completely in the dark, except for
Mhm.
like some guidance that I had from the internet, some mentors that helped me find the way. But I realized like, there's a lot of gems that may not know of what opportunities are out there. So kind of going off of that. So somebody, let's say, is listening to
Mm.
this right now and is really in your shoes. So sort of a two-part question here. First of all, how can they get over being intimidated to even apply to MIT, right? And if so, what are some things you would recommend to help them kind of stand out? And I'm talking about like from your perspective, what would they do and not maybe just chase like a particular accolade or this or that, but what can they do if they're coming from your background as well? What do you think?
Got you. So to that first point of how to get over the anxiety of like applying in the first place, I think like somewhat like a broken record, but I think it always goes back to having a strong enough why or
Yeah.
motivation because like yeah, like having an objective that's greater than the school itself. And then I feel like that would help you get over the anxiety because it'll reframe it from being like, there's this shot that I may or may not miss to being, this is one more piece of the puzzle that I'm trying to build overall. And it's like, I'm trying to think of like the best analogy, but like if your phone charger stops working, it's not like you're just like, oh, I guess my phone just dies. It's like, okay, I'll go find another charger. I'll
Yeah.
find something else to like amplify this thing that I'm already trying to do. And then for like making yourself stand out after you've already made that decision to go, specifically if you're coming from like a background like mine, I would say I don't want to just like umbrella like I guess suggest sports, but that was just the route I went because yeah, so like a higher level thing there is to pick something, multiple things that are genuinely exciting to you, and then obviously a good portion or like a good like amount of those should have something to do with academics and or the major that you're applying to. And so I'm thinking of additional like projects and stuff I did. There was like a Arduino robot I built. I was a part of like this club called SecMe, which is like a science competition team, like very like calm. Like it wasn't like science Olympiad or anything like that, but it's examples that you are one interested and competent in the field of study that you're indicating interest to, or like that you're trying to apply to.
Yeah. Did you have sort of like a passion project or a side project, side hustle during high school? Because it seems to be like the theme online that a lot of people are applying to, like these top engineering STEM schools have like some kind of like STEM related side hustle that they're doing. I was just wondering if that was part of your experience or not.
Not in the typical sense, or like it was a bit lackluster, I guess. Because I know like one of my friends who also applied, they had like a capstone project that they had submitted. That wasn't the case for me. I had the Arduino project. I think I had done it as a it was yeah, it was a part of my involvement with the IB program where
Mhm.
they required you to do a personal project as just a part of the, I guess, like yeah, the personal project could have been whatever, I guess, like because there was like
Yeah.
people who just made it a fitness tracker, like, oh, I did these workouts and like they kind of like half baked it. And so I took that same opportunity and turned it into like, okay, this is something I actually care about. Let me do something with robotics.
Okay.
And I think to that point where it wasn't because like when I had done it, it wasn't out of like, oh, I'm doing this because MIT is going to like it. It's more so like scratching my own itch and then some of the pieces had felt fallen together in terms of when it came time to apply. So it's like, okay, what have I been showing an interest in? What do I act like? What do I actually have an interest in tandem with what have I been like doing to support that, like I guess, claim, and then
Yeah,
putting those together and be like, okay, I've been doing robotics and like science and STEM related things. I'm applying as a mechanical engineer with a minor in computer science. They like fit together, I guess.
that makes sense. And then going back to that, the other question popped in my head, but what point did you decide on applying to MIT? Was it late or early on?
It was that I was about to say it's both early and late, but that's somewhat of a non-answer. I guess like in terms of the timeline, I had like the decision making process of MIT and like why it was only two schools was because I think when I was like 11 or 12, like this is middle school, I made that like I guess pact with myself. It was more so like, okay, I am really dissatisfied with like the I guess like social status we're at right now. Like I see my family struggling and it's like I'm not okay with this. How do I fix this? It's like lawyer, doctor, engineer, lawyer, doctor, take too long. Okay, engineering. If we're gonna be doing engineering, where do the best engineers go? And then like MIT had came into because I think I like searched it up like I want to Google like okay where do like literally best
Yeah.
engineers the best
First search result, you're like, okay, that's it.
okay this one and so it had like and I also did just enjoy like I had passion for engineering because I like knowing how things work and like being able to build things. And so from there it was more so like okay, I'm like, okay, if this is what I'm trying to do long term, like this engineering path, then I need to start walking the walk. But yeah, I would say I set the sights on it pretty early then. But after like I set the sight on it and then I didn't it wasn't like I was like looking into everything MIT specifically. I just started more so looking at into everything engineering. And then it's like since I'm doing well, this is like I think when it really like clicked, like, okay, I'll actually apply here. It's probably like end of junior when I got my SAT score. Like end of junior year and like going into senior year, it's like, oh, I actually have the stats to make this like this is
Okay.
reasonable for me to be doing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was no longer like a goal, it was became part of a plan at that point. You're like, okay, like I can see a path to it. Okay. I like that. Because some people like honestly, there's this line between reality and delusion. And yes, getting into a very, competitive program is going to be, bordering on the delusional for most people. It's super competitive. But in reality, like at least have what it takes to get in and then leave that up to them, but not the other way around. So I kind of like that thought process. You had it in the back of your mind, but there was a point where you kind of decided like, okay, let's make moves. I can see a path to MIT.
Yeah.
Okay, so kind of now as a student, what has been a very interesting, unique class that you've taken so far or looking forward to take?
Ah, first thing in terms of like looking forward to take because this semester I'm taking a class called 2007, which is Design and Manufacturing 1.
Oh, okay.
And the reason I'm particularly excited to take it is because it's essentially like it's like the canon event for sophomores, where this is your first real taste of actuating a design from scratch into like a physical product. And so, and I think there's going to be like companies that come to see our like presentations and stuff. So there's
Mm,
also an opportunity for internships, etc. But I'm just really excited for like the opportunity to get like hands-on training. Because up until now, since like as a freshman in university, you're going to be doing like your general requirements and like prerequisites. And then I feel like I finally unlocked one of the like the like capstone cool classes.
yeah. That's such a cool feeling because you got to put in your dues to get to that point. So it feels like you're about to what's one thing that people don't know about MIT now that you're on the inside, so to speak? Or a myth maybe that you've busted since it's been there.
That you have to, I guess, only be one note. I'm not sure. I guess I'm not exactly sure because I don't think it was necessarily in the community of like building up a opinion of MIT before I got here. Like I mentioned, it was kind of like back burner slash around. But I would say like mainly like getting the sense that like, oh, everyone here is always stuck up or like always doing work all the time, no breaks. Like there's a lot of fun to be had and there's like a lot of diversity of just personality and like thought. Like there's a lot of like very unique individuals and I don't know if I would have necessarily expected that from just like a science and engineering school. Like, oh, I guess a more succinct version is that there's a heavy emphasis on arts and humanities, more so than I would have expected.
Do you guys get sort of like, your STEM majors, your engineers, do you get to have some kind of interaction with the humanities students?
Yeah, definitely. There's an institutional requirement that you have to, I think, yeah, you have to take two communication intensive courses
Mhm.
per year. So like some sort of like English, like writing, history, psychology, something along those lines. Like you have to have at least one of those per semester.
Okay, got it. Okay, so that's a bit reassuring for a lot of people, both on, the humanities side and even the STEM side, that they're not signing off their life just to study one discipline from now on. There's still like that interdisciplinary nature to it. Uh,
Mm.
okay, so I kind of want to like zoom back out a little bit. And if you could give one advice for somebody trying to get into MIT, what would it be? I know there's a lot of things that you can give them. You have a lot of understanding of the process so far, but what is one thing that you think would is a really like interesting maybe perspective shift or a tactical advice that somebody could, employ?
Mm. Yeah, I would say in that like the most useful, like if you're going high level, giving you like a mindset or perspective
Yeah.
to approach it, I would say look at it like a marketing problem or like a sales problem. Like you as a candidate are selling yourself as an investment to the school because like if, again like so thinking of it from a marketing perspective and as like a byproduct of that, like in marketing, you have to think from the customer's point of view as well. And in this
Mhm.
case, the customer is the institution.
Yeah.
And what they're buying or like they're looking to invest in is like somewhat of like a racehorse of like, okay, we're
Yeah.
betting on this horse, which is it, like, where do I think I'm gonna make my money back on? Like, I personally like recently like I like NBA, so it's like think of it like prize picks. Like, okay, I know Joel Embiid is gonna get like 30 points or something like that. I want to pick bets
Yeah.
such that I know I'm gonna get my ROI. And so for like at MIT, they want to know that you're going to come onto their campus and make it a more innovative and or like collaborative like community in space.
Mhm.
So as much as you can, try to communicate that and like frame the things that you've already done and or care about in a way such that it's going to speak to their values and like what their concerns are.
Yeah. I totally agree. I mean, sometimes you could have done all the right things, but you just never said it in the way that they want to hear it. And
Mm,
that takes like it's a skill in itself, how to put all that together. Like, and I'm sure you're gonna be going through this if you haven't already, like kind of pitching a product to somebody or a service, if you're trying to get money. And
yeah.
the easiest thing in the world to come up with like a 15 slide PowerPoint. But if you're trying to do that in three to four slides, that becomes tricky. Like, how do I condense the information that I want to relay into something very short? And that's kind of, being in that mindset, especially for some of these schools that are not going to give you a second chance. They're going to look like it's, I don't, it's a no from me, to quote Shark
Yeah.
Tank many times.
I
Um,
think like to that point, I think something you had mentioned the last time you spoke is that you have
yeah,
to like develop an elevator pitch.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
something you can like use to communicate like who you are, what you want, and like why you're a good fit in like 1 to 2 sentences.
Exactly. 100%. Okay. Enough about all this MIT and college talk. For you, if you could instantly master any skill or hobby, what would it be? Like you snap your
Learning,
fingers. What's that?
learning. I said learning, like the meta skill, like how to learn faster and more effectively. Because like I have it written down in like my like I have like one of my journals, like it's like mission statement. So it's like what are my like longest term objective goals? And it's like continuous learning and becoming more effective at that. Because the world never stops teaching.
Look at that. And that's why you're at MIT. Ruben, this has been a great, great talk for me. I think I gained a lot out of it. I know for a fact a lot of people watching have gained so much out of it. There's a lot of like speculation online, Redditing this and Redditing that, but how about like you actually get it from the person who's there right now? Where can people find you if they want to learn more about what you do?
Yeah, so I post content to Instagram at rstephen.04, rsteven.04. On TikTok, same thing, but it's rsteven_04. YouTube is just my name, Ruben Steven, as well as I'm also on Facebook and I'm planning on like starting to post content on LinkedIn as well.
Perfect. So you basically everywhere that anybody is going to need.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah. I mean, I hope you keep continuing posting content in whatever form that is and, just kind of documenting your journey. A lot of people would want to see it. They're rooting for you, but they also want to see what does that future look like? And you having it out there for people, especially from backgrounds that are sort of not represented as much in higher education. I think that's super, super valuable. So I really appreciate the talk today. Thank you so much, man. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, likewise. Have a good one.
Take care.